Welcome to another current commentary live stream. This one is on the coronavirus and the recently released statistics on the deaths in the UK. Thank you for watching. This is important because the official statistics on the cases is a gross underestimate due to the rate that due to people being contagious long before they show symptoms. As well as this, the government has changed its policy to ration the coronavirus test kits to only those that have serious symptoms. So those who might have it aren't being tested to check if they do or not. Saying that, there's something like 60,000 people have been checked. But only 20,000 have actually got it. This is very worrying. So let's proceed. Graph of the cases in blue and the increase in cases in orange, with the x-axis being the date in March. So this is the 4th, 6th, 8th, and so on, and this being the number. So the UK growth rate of cases for the last 2 weeks has averaged 28% per day. So if you think of this as interest rates or inflation, which normally acts every year, with them being typically 2%, this is 28% per day. The UK's growth rate of deaths has been closer to 50% more per day. This is deeply worrying, as the death rate is far harder for the government to fudge the numbers and is less vulnerable to the problems associated with taking such measurements. This would suggest, if you assume the death rate in terms of cases has been constant, the virus has been spreading at 50% per day, not 30. A picture from the Spanish flu. Spanish flu statistics. So this is the epidemic that seems to be closest in terms of how easily spread and one of the worst in history. It infected 27% of the world's population. A little over a quarter of every person alive in this time period was sick with the virus. It killed 10%. So in 1918, 2.5% of the world's population died from the virus. The R0, which is a measure of the average number of people that the illness spreads to for every case. So this means that if I have the virus, on average, I would spread it to 2 to 3 people before I died or recovered. How do they compare? So the exact RO is hard to estimate due to being contagious before you're symptomatic. Let's assume you're contagious for 6 days. The lowest common multiple of 2 and 3, and similar to that implied by the UK government advice. This is the first of our assumptions. So if you refer back to our previous data, and that each day, each case has a 30 to 50% chance of giving it to someone. Referring to this data here. This would lead to an R0 between 2 and 3, which by coincidence is the same as the modern estimate of the Spanish flu. This is deeply worrying because, all things being equal, you'd expect the same proportion of the population to get infected. Admittedly, all things aren't equal. There have been medical advances, which, yay, it hopefully won't escalate as high. But on the downside, we have much larger cities. The global population is much higher. This virus could go around the world for much longer. How deadly is it? The figures coming from different countries vary wildly, but let's settle for 2%, which you hear about most often. I'd rather underestimate this than overestimate it so as not to cause alarm. The figures you hear from different countries vary so wildly because they're measuring that if you're not testing people very much, the denominator of dead people divided by people with it is going to be very small, giving an exaggerated figure for the death rate. But somewhere like South Korea has a very low death rate due to their large amount of medical support and infrastructure, spotting cases very quickly so they can act and mitigate the symptoms before they get severe, as well as testing everyone constantly so that their denominator is very high, very large, making the overall number very small. So if you divide a large number by an even bigger number, you get a very small one. But a big number divided by an equal size number, you get a much larger one. But the 2% death rate would mean that it's 1/5 as deadly as Spanish flu. However, there is a stark warning. 20% of cases require critical medical care. Many countries do not have the medical equipment to handle all the cases they are likely to get. Look at Italy. They don't have the respirator equipment that they need, despite having multiple more than the UK per capita. This means that much of Europe is likely to go the same way that Italy has gone already. In terms of case numbers, if you trust the government statistics and the growth rate of the cases from the statistics, that's the 30%. Italy is only about 9 days ahead of the UK on this curve. Worst case scenario. Too many people have it. The medical services are overwhelmed. Production of necessary medical equipment does not happen fast enough. This could lead to the death rate skyrocketing. If you assumed those in critical care had 50% chance of survival, this is another estimate, but take it or leave it. It's your choice. I'm not putting too much credence on this number. But if you assumed 50% of those in critical care survived, that would give this a death rate of 10%. We'd be in Spanish flu territory. However, there is hope. I can see several answers to mitigate this problem. A national effort to produce, they are as follows. A national effort to produce as much medical equipment as possible while keeping the effort to keep contagion as low as possible. This is, well, the second half is what the British government has been claiming to do, but there's little evidence of the first half. Because as long as there are enough equipment and medical supplies to support those that are ill, we don't have to worry too much. The death rate will stay low, but if this runs out, it will skyrocket. The other option which you could view as the China option. Hard global 2 to 3 week quarantine. Nobody leaves their house and medical professionals live on site, which is roughly what China is doing. There's also, it's fine, at worst, 2.5% will die and 25% of us will catch it and we'll all be immune with little issues in future. Copy South Korea. Keep everyone updated, test like mad, isolate them as soon as possible so they catch it to reduce the opportunity for it to spread. So if when people are not symptomatic but carrying the virus and spreading it, if they can be quarantined and get medical help, their cases are unlikely to escalate, and they're unlikely to spread it. Thank you for watching. I have some other charts worth viewing, but I forgot to copy them into that slide. For those skeptical of my 50% estimate, there is a graph. The blue line marks the 50% growth rate estimate. The orange is the real data in terms of deaths in the UK. I haven't kept track quite as much in terms of deaths as I have with cases, as the numbers have been too low to have much statistics, and I haven't been worrying about it too much, possibly foolishly, due to that 2% figure we keep hearing from China. So here it is. Oops, sorry, wrong button. So as I was saying, the blue is the estimate, growing at 50% per day, and the orange is the real data. As you can see, the dots are almost directly on top of each other. And if we compare the growth rates of the official case figures and the growth of the official death figures. So some of this higher death rate increase could just be the health service starting to get strained and declining medical support that can be provided to each patient, or it's due to the cases rising by 50% and only the severe cases that we know about. So the real figure could be 50% growth, but we're not aware of it quite so much due to less people having serious symptoms. Sorry for the delay and the lack of smoothness. Technical issues. Come on. Copy. Who would have thought you'd have so much difficulty copying and pasting something? So this time, the orange line is the upper estimate based off the 50% spread rate per day coming from the death rate. The blue is the underestimate coming from the cases. This grows very quickly. As we're only on the 18th, as we saw earlier. This means we'd expect the death rate to be in excess of the thousands by the end of this week. Now, admittedly, that's not saying 1,000 people will be dying per day by the end of this week. That'll be 1,000 people in the UK will have died by the end of this week, which, although not as large and severe, is still tragic and still very dangerous. This is not a situation we want to be in. At first, I was in the crowd of, this is much ado about nothing, the university is overreacting. But now that I've run these numbers, I understand why. It's just a great shame that nothing that has been done so far has actually shown up as improving anything in the statistics. And now that we have enough data for deaths to get a reasonable average and to start extrapolating, it gets an already high rate of spread even higher. So thank you for watching. I won't take any more time. I have a feeling we're likely to go into a much harder form of quarantine soon. So stock up. My advice, although do what you want, I'm no professional at this. I'm an engineer by trade, not a biologist specializing in, or medic. Buy your normal perishable shopping trip for your weekly shop and buy however much non-perishables are left. So thank you for watching. Stay safe and wash your hands. The reason why the 20-second soap thing is there, because the soap breaks down the lipids, because soap is an emulsifier. It allows the fatty membrane of the virus to mix with the water. And it needs to be for 20 seconds, as it takes time for this to act, to rip the viruses apart. So, keep clean, keep healthy, stay safe, and maybe it's worth rationing. Goodbye.